Hi guys!
Welcome to this new episode of A Dog's Soul. I'm Anita, I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about a perfect walk for your dog and, of course, yourself. So stay tuned and have fun. Alright, so this is going to be about something we do daily with our dog, something we consider very important in the relationship with our dogs, and we hear a lot about it. So in my country, it's even in the law that your dog has to have the opportunity to go to the toilet outside and be walked for a certain amount of time a day. So this is considered very important, but what it's often overseen is that how we plan or execute this walk affects our dogs a lot. So what a lot of people do is they get their dogs on a collar and a short leash, and then they start walking, and they're walking very fast. And the main point of this is to get the dog exercised. And the thing is, for a dog, this is very unnecessary. So I'm not saying that a dog shouldn't walk or shouldn't exercise, but if we look at the needs and the motivations of our dogs, walking just for the sake of walking isn't one of them. If we let our dogs just decide what they want to do outside and how they want to execute this walking time, this would look very differently. So you can see this when your dog's off leash, and also if you just attach a long line to your dog, of course only on a harness, never on a collar, because of the possible damage to the neck. But if you have your dog on a long line or off leash, you can see what your dog would do if it's his choice and his choice only. And then you can see your dog will go around pretty slowly most of the time, except if your dog has a stress problem. But for most of the relaxed dogs, they would stroll around really slowly and keep their nose to the ground, sniff around, pee. Maybe if they find some kind of smell in the ground, like a mouse or something like that, they would maybe start digging and follow that smell, or they would pick up some game trail and follow that. And what this means is our dogs would be led by their noses. So a dog wouldn't just run around for the sake of running. Of course, some dogs like to run around a bit and play with other dogs and something like that, but they wouldn't just trot a certain way for kilometers after kilometers. So what a dog would choose for himself is exploring, sniffing, experiencing new things, and mostly, of course, with his nose, because dogs are very nose reliant animals, and smelling is their strongest sense, and of course they want to use it. So of course we can find a compromise if we want to walk, just for the sake of walking, but there should always be a possibility for the dog to experience his own needs and just explore in his way. Because what this does is, first, it's mental stimulation. So if you're concerned about occupying your dog or do something to get him tired, this would be something very natural for your dog. So walking your dog in a straightforward way, where your dog is only running, will keep his physical activity high and will train his body, but it's not necessary for health issues. A dog who is brought outside every day and gets to snuff around, and of course also is allowed to decide which way to go sometimes, or all of the time, and do something like that, he's moving as well, and he's moving slowly, and therefore his muscles are trained as well and in a more natural way. Of course, stray dogs would run around for quite some time to find food sources, but to be honest, our dogs don't have to do that, but we can provide them with opportunities like that. So another thing, except for exploring the territory or new paths or new areas, would be to provide your dog with the possibility to find food. So any search games which are either rewarded with food or have the food as the goal for the search are very natural for our dogs. Which isn't natural is any kind of rule about how long they have to walk by your side before they are allowed to pee or sniff or do something like that. That's absolutely not natural for any dog, and it's really unfair. Because maybe you have experienced this before. You are just driving from A to B or going somewhere and you need to go to the toilet. But there is no toilet around, and you're also not in a wooded area where you can just go. And the longer you have to hold it, the more anxious you get to find a toilet, of course. And that's not a very pleasant feeling. But if we walk our dogs, we want them to have a really nice experience. We want them to have fun outside, and it isn't fun to hold bodily functions whatsoever. So not allowing your dog to pee or poop when he has to is cruel. It's just cruel. And there is no function to this. Not at all. There is no, you are the leader or you're the boss of your dog because you can keep him from peeing. That's just, it's not necessary. And of course, you can't let your dog pee on somebody else's house or a car or something like that, of course. But for these occasions, you can work with your dog on a go-ahead cue or something like that, where your dog knows, okay, he has to move with you for a little bit. But this can be taught very nicely, and this doesn't mean that you have to walk for a certain amount of time or distance before your dog is allowed to relieve himself. So what's the usual thing for people on walks is they just walk. And for the dog, this is sometimes stressful because a short leash gets some discomfort for the dog, especially when it's attached to a collar, and it's boring. It's really boring for the dog. Of course, he can sniff as well while running, but especially when it's a little warm outside and the pace is very, very fast, your dog has to pant, and panting and sniffing excludes each other. So a dog can't pant and sniff at the same time. Therefore, again, keep it slow. And there's no downside to letting your dog choose a path he finds interesting. So, of course, again, there is no problem with leadership or something like that, only because you let your dog choose which way he likes. And if you want your dog to walk on a loose leash, then of course you should make it easy for him to do so. So this also means that you don't get to drag your dog around as well, which I'm sure you don't do anyway. But some people do that, especially with small dogs, that they walk along, and if the dog stops to sniff, they don't realize it right away, and then they just pull their dog away from that sniffing spot and drag them along. But of course, how should a dog learn to keep the leash loose if the owner straightens it all the time and pulls on it all the time? That's something that's really unfair for the dog. because he can't see any consistency. And a leash isn't on the dog to pull him around. If you want your dog to do something like walk along or change direction or look at you or whatever it is, you can just tell him. And if it is something you need on a regular basis, then you should teach your dog a signal for it. For example, if I want my dog to look at me, I give him a signal, he looks at me, and he gets rewarded for it. And of course that works. So why should I tug on the leash? There's no reason for it. And if I'm walking with my dog and I want to change direction, why shouldn't I address him first? If I'm walking with a friend and I say, hey, let's go this way because there is a nice restaurant I wanted to show you, I would say so. I wouldn't just grab his shirt and pull him with me. But we do that with our dogs, and there's no reason for it. And for the dog, he gets dragged away from everything interesting, and that's very stressful. And he has to come with us because he's on a leash. While the leash should really just be something to keep our dog safe and while walking in an area where there's traffic, or to prevent our dog from chasing something and therefore keeping other animals safe. This is the purpose of a leash, not that one can drag the dog around. And to be honest, if somebody did that to you, you would be very pissed, and at least at the second attempt you would say something. And our dogs just have to live with that, and that's not fair. So how would a really nice walk for your dog look like? There is something interesting to smell. And if you want to provide your dog with something interesting and new, then you can drive somewhere where your dog hasn't been, at least for some time or at all. So often very interesting spots for dogs are industrial areas because there are many people running around during the week, and if you bring your dog there on an evening or on the weekend, he can sniff all these different smells from these different people, and maybe from some construction vehicles or something like that. So this is really interesting. Or of course, if your dog's into hunting, then a wooded area, a forest, something like that would be very interesting. And you can also choose different parts of a forest to just show your dog new stuff. And this would also keep his mind busy and make him tired, but in a relaxed and very comfortable way. Also, choose a leash length that is fitting for your dog's needs and your own needs. So if your dog can't run off leash because he would chase something, or because he is in puberty and doesn't listen very well at the moment, or because he's stressed, or because he gets fearful, or whatever reason, then choose a long line. Attach it to a harness that fits your dog really well and which he's comfortable wearing, and so your dog can explore and just go around and do his thing. And if you want something, you can address your dog and ask him to do stuff. And of course, there might be some conflicting motivations if your dog's sniffing at an interesting spot and you want him to look at you. But if you see this and your dog decides that the spot is more interesting than you at the moment, then try using the signal in a less interesting situation the next time and work on your dog's distraction. So, of course, if you want your dog to do something, then it should be rewarding for your dog. And therefore, you need to build a history of reward first. And then you can ask your dog to do something even with more distraction. But back to the walk. So this would be how a nice walk would look like. And of course, if your dog wants to stop and sniff around, then you can just let him, or you can just go with him and look if there is something you can see that's interesting. Or you can also provide your dog with something interesting because you've lost a treat accidentally, of course, and you can show that to your dog and therefore get more interesting yourself, because your dog sees you as the source of good things and the source of interesting spots. So he will be paying more attention to you in the future. Also, you can choose a spot where you can sit down with your dog and just watch the surroundings, or watch people go by or dogs passing by or something like that. So this would be also something very interesting. It would be some kind of alternative to watching TV. And of course, you'll do something together with your dog, and that would strengthen your connection and your relationship. And of course, if your dog experiences some kind of anxiety or fear on the walk, be there for him. He needs you as his advocate and as his friend to just be with him and help him through the rough stuff. And don't worry about any kind of negative outcome to this, because there is none. There wouldn't be any problem with leadership, or your dog wouldn't want to try to overpower you or something like that because you let him decide which way to go. That's just not how dogs work. And yeah, if your dog doesn't really listen to you outside, then it could be because he's too stressed, or because the different stimuli surrounding him are just a little overwhelming and he can't listen to you. And then the walk should be a little shorter, so that your dog can learn to cope with everything that is out there. So to sum it up, it would be: choose a leash that is comfortable for you and your dog, with a length that is enough for your dog to explore and not get pulled around. Use the leash only as a safety measure, and don't pull your dog on it. If you want your dog to do something, ask him. And if he can, he will do that. And if he can't, you need to work on it a little bit more. Show your dog new stuff. Bring him to environments he hasn't explored yet. That will be very stimulating and great for his brain, and work against any kind of boredom. And of course, if your dog wants to sniff somewhere, pee or poop, then if it's possible and if it's not destroying somebody's property, then just let him do it. There is no problems with any kind of dominance thing or something like that. So don't worry about it. And that way you give your dog a really nice experience, and he will just have a lot of fun going out with you on walks. Therefore, I wish you a lot of fun on your next walk, and I'd love for you to tell me how you did experience this, and maybe what changed for you. And yeah, of course, if you have any issues you want to discuss on the show, then feel free to write me an email, text me, whatever you like. All right, so until next time, bye.